I'm going to open up for questions in 1 second, but I did have one last one of my own, which is the thing that I kind of worry about a little bit as somebody who just like collects these things rather than actually creates them is attribution. I mean, this is something that actually like every month or so I'll just wake up terrified about because, you know, I'm a big believer in giving credit to other people's work, but at the same time, like I don't know the sources for most of these things. And I'd be interested to hear if any of you guys have ever had any experiences with attribution. Like Aaron, if any of your work has showed up in some other way, you know, that was weird or, yeah, but I don't know.
I can answer.
Yeah.
That, if it's about animated GIF model, I made it to be distributed and not to have any credit ever.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is what's important about animated GIFs, at least animated GIFs of the first generation.
Cool. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the stuff that I do the output is not a GIF file. So, I mean, obviously a simple file is easy to replicate infinitely on Tumblr or whatever. Like, you know, I'm sure like all those notes that are on that one GIF that I made, like no one knows that it was me who made it, and that's fine. I think like that's sort of the nature of Tumblr is when you put something on there, you just like set it free and see what happens with it. But it's not really something I think about very much, probably because most of the time the final output of whatever I'm doing isn't a GIF.
Right.
I mean, I've had some stuff from the OK Focus website, as we've seen in other places, like little GIF elements or in like link styles, but it's nothing to like really sweat necessarily. I think part of attribution though, like certain people you just like can't even rip off. Like I mentioned Lacey before, Lialina. It's like you just can't rip it off because it's like so distinct. Same with like Mr. GIF stuff, you know. But if something like this, like there's no attribution. It's just kind of like in the ether. You know? So like what Aaron said, you just kind of let it go and there it is. But I don't know, attribution is also something that we have fun with. Like when we post, there's a blog, Brown Cardigan. I don't know if you guys know that blog. Anybody know that blog?
Mm-mm.
No? Oh, they're like, Brown Cardigan is kind of old school in terms of the type of you know, image blog that Lameme is, and we kind of have this fake battle back and forth where we just make fun of each other a lot online. And so attribution will like kind of get angry at each other for stealing content, even if the content probably came from someone else. And you know, neither of us own it, but still we feel like we have the right to be like, you stole that from me, even though it's like a GIF that's like, you know, 3 years old that we posted late or whatever. So attribution online is a tricky thing.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, so I guess we've got about 10 or 11 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions about GIFs? Any favorite GIFs? Any least favorite GIFs? Yeah, right here. How come there's no Photoshop for GIFs?
Well, Photoshop does make GIFs.
So questions about tools and like creation, how come it's not easier to create GIFs, basically?
So you're saying like, how come there's no really easy way to like dump a video in and get a GIF out?
Well, I just solved it and a tool that's much more palette aware, a tool that's made for doing these, as opposed to incidentally getting out a tool that's made for making apps.
I don't know. I think Aaron is kind of right in being like, Photoshop is the tool to be used for making GIFs. I know Jamie Wilkinson made something that you can kind of put images onto a website and then it will get a GIF back. I don't know how like fine-tuned that is, but that's a good question. Maybe that can be somebody's startup.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be an interesting question to ask someone who's a prolific original GIF creator, like what is their chosen tool? I mean, I'm sure with DVDP, for example, he's using his chosen tool for motion graphics and then applying his like knowledge of the compression scheme to output the like the cleanest possible thing. You know, you take a video file and you can convert it to a GIF with using any number of tools.
I mean, you mentioned Nausea earlier. He uses a combination of like After Effects and Photoshop, which are both motion, contemporary programs, but there are also a lot of vintage programs from like Windows 95 era web design, like Deluxe Paint 2, Animation Suite, that were designed to output GIFs, but there's no real commercial application for GIFs anymore, so nobody's developing
There is still Cool 3D. I don't know if anybody ever used such a tool.
No, what is that?
Cool 3D.
Yeah.
Imagine what is that. It makes animated GIFs and 3D animated GIFs.
I've found a couple really great iPhone apps for creating GIFs that I use actually really frequently, so I've actually started making my own GIFs, but they're more like just diary projects than anything else. So Jittergram, Giffer, there's a bunch of others out there. But
3 frames?
Sorry?
3 frames.
3 frames? I'm a big fan, yeah. Right here actually, and then in the back.
Yeah, I noticed two distinct patterns in all these GIFs. One is where it's a recurring animation, almost like this one, just to show that we can animate through this sort of file. The other is kind of like with, if you don't remember me, or even the bear mascot one with the cake, like where over the repetitions you can pick up so many details. And like we kept laughing at that bear one just every time because we see something new. And I went across the panel, if you prefer one or the other to see online than to create, and then why?
Seamless versus not, basically, or like seamless animation versus not? Like, is there a preference there?
Yeah, like a preference for like a repeating graphic, kind of like the ones that you actually modeled for, where it's like it's a repeating animation, and the ones that are more detail oriented. That, like, is there a preference when you're making them and watching them, or is there no? You don't even consider that when looking at it.
Well, I definitely lean towards the sort of seamlessly animating ones, and I think that the quality of sort of being able to discern details upon repetition isn't like exclusive to the other kind necessarily, but just like the sort of the feeling of like, I don't know, for me it's like entering like a zone and just kind of zoning out in it, you know? It's like, because there's no end point and no starting point, I can just kind of like let it wash over me a bit. So for me, that's appealing to me across many different art forms, so it appeals to me in GIFs specifically too.
That's cool. Yeah, it's like high art versus low art or something, I don't know, but yeah. Yes?
So that was actually part of my question. I'm wondering, we have a panel of artists and curators, but I'm wondering what you see, if there's a value for the GIF in a non-art context. I mean, like, most GIFs don't have titles, but authorship is like hard to discern. And like, you talked a little bit about GIFs as conversation. I wonder if that's like maybe one place where the value is, and you see other places where they have value outside of art context.
There is, do you mean how they are used in the everyday online practice, or what is your?
Just, I mean, you know,
Like commerce or?
I mean, like as a utility, like I'm using it as an image format online on my website, like as a utility, like here's this, and I mean, that's kind of what you spoke to
Yeah.
when my boyfriend came back from the war, right? Like you weren't trying to use a GIF, you just needed animation. And so there was the
well, but
GIF.
you're still making work in that.
Me?
Okay.
Yes.
Like how about all the little emoticons in Gmail, for instance?
Yeah. Or like the thing I was actually mentioning that got like ripped off from the OK Focus website was like a link style where you hovered on something and we used a GIF in the background to like make something seem like it was sparkling, you know? And there's other ways that we could have arrived at that effect, but the GIF was the most obvious, the easiest, the most effective, and so we just used that. So I think that like the GIF as an image format totally has a place in like just being another image on the web. Like it doesn't have to be like a one-liner or like a funny picture of a cat. If that's what you're getting
Do
at.
you see all those as being art? Or like, where, you know, how do you draw that line?
I mean, if I'm using it as an element in like a design on my website, I don't necessarily see it as art. I like would see that as just another effect. Like, if, you know, people used to fake drop shadow by having like an actual JPEG of a shadow. I wouldn't consider that like art necessarily. It's just a design element, you know. So in that instance, I think the GIF would be a design element.
All the way in the back.
So one of the things that really fascinates me about GIFs is that they are a persistent element of the internet that has continued to exist, despite the updating of every other element. And I'm just curious as to why, for all the panelists, why you view this as being a medium that has continued, despite the fact that, I mean, there's videos out there, you can watch the videos. Why are these antiquated, ancient little objects continuing in contemporary practice and contemporary society?
there's so much there. I think that for me, so much the symbol of the web, it would be difficult to leave them behind. Like almost impossible. They should.
I think from sort of a more technical standpoint, I think there's a lot of weird mechanisms that are preventing us from having anything better than GIFs. Like there's a standard for an animated PNG, which would be really great if that was a widely supported standard, but you know, there's a lot of bureaucracy in the development of web standards and browsers supporting them and stuff. So it's kind of what we're stuck with for the foreseeable future as far as like a concise file format that can support animation. Well, I guess technically there's like video files, but there's something about the instantaneous loading and looping that makes it a special kind of format, I guess.
I think that for my take on it is that they are this sort of lowest common denominator of, like, you know that it will be supported. And earlier, touching on like porn websites, which have been like the adopter of the format for so long, especially on the internet. It just seems to be the perfect tool for people to accomplish this goal of showing this brief clip. And it's lent itself so well to certain things that the internet does that I don't see anyone ever fully abandoning something. It's like, if it isn't broke, why fix it? And for whatever reason, most of the internet doesn't think it's broke. And there's also the nostalgia aspect.
For sure. And you mentioned like technology getting better. I think it's awesome seeing technology getting better and then seeing what people do with that as like browsers can support more complicated GIFs, bigger file sizes. Like the internet is just getting generally faster, so people can, you know, download larger file sizes. Tumblr updates, you know, now they used to be like 500K and now it's a meg, and then everything changes and people creating content for that. So technology changes, you know, the what creators can actually produce, which is really cool.
Question in the back?
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, you know, the fact that GIFs are becoming so much more part of the conversation about pop culture. Like as soon as Mad Men's over, there's tons of GIFs, the best moments of Mad Men, or, you know, something crazy happens on TV or reality TV, that moment, that, you know, instant GIF in blue that you see everywhere. And I'm curious if it's, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, if it's because the tech is a lot easier to make things in Photoshop, it's a lot easier than it used to be, or more accessible, or if it's partially due, well, this is not true, but, you know, we're sort of moving towards a web that's a little more visual oriented because of things like Tumblr and Instagram, or even Pinterest, that we're used to sort of seeing content and dissecting it that way, or
When we were kind of meeting the other day, I forget which one of you guys was talking about how a lot of TV shows, sitcoms in particular, have moments that seem designed to be reproduced in this way. And Tumblr in particular has such thriving communities for fandom. And I do think that the barrier for creating a GIF has been lowered tremendously. So to just slap a subtitle on something and have like a reaction shot has become almost like, you know, a de facto way to acknowledge a funny moment on an episode or a poignant moment. I think with Mad Men, because it's so visually stylized, that lent itself super well to that. But I do think that these shows, particularly shows like Community or ones that already really want to play to this audience, are for sure aware of that and like, you know, catering to that.
And I think it's a tool. I mean, what you were mentioning was that, like, we were getting drinks before the conference started, and someone came to me and asked me if I thought that the new Nicki Minaj video was like designed to be split up into animated GIFs and put on the internet, because they thought that like that's how you know, the producers wanted the video to be consumed. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I do think that platforms and the way people are consuming media is changing, and that does maybe lend itself to more like GIFable moments. And of course the tools being easier.
All right, well, we are at our hour, and I just wanted to say thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it, and thanks to you guys for being here.